Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning for who participates from the Americas. Thank you to be here at an EIPM webinar focusing on how procurement is perceived by our stakeholders. In procurement, we focus very frequently on the quality of the relationship we have with our stakeholders. This quality is obviously dependent on how they see us, how they perceive us. And this is what we want to question today during this hour. So, procurement is frequently perceived, monitored as a kind of saving machine. We emerged as a support function 60 years ago. We are measured frequently on the reduction of price, of costs, and risk. But this is not the situation we're confronted with. We are confronted with more and more innovation opportunity, technology opportunity, market opportunity, as well as cost opportunities. So, how we were born and how we developed has nothing to do with what is requested from procurement today in 2022. So we need to change what stakeholders expect from us. It's a nonsense that they carry on expecting supply security and price reduction only. Of course, we'll have to provide that to secure the supplies and to reduce prices and costs. But we are also to provide much more than that. We need to reformat our relation with stakeholders so that they perceive us, they see us, they expect us to do something different. At the IPM, we believe that procurement needs to gauge how stakeholders perceive us, to measure that. We need to understand how they see us, to ask them the question, to survey them, and to change their perception of who we are. We also believe that procurement needs to take initiative towards stakeholders to change this perception, disrupting initiative to surprise people, to make them aware that we are not what they thought we are or what they thought we were, and to monitor this perception and to demonstrate it through the measurement of our value contribution. This is the intention of this webinar. So we'll spend some time understanding how we can survey stakeholder perceptions. I will present you a few questions which big companies have asked their stakeholders, how we can be involved by stakeholders, how to increase this involvement, to improve their satisfaction of procurement, how to set up relations in which we create value together, notably innovation value, how we can undertake initiatives which are disruptive so that we surprise them and we take the buyer stakeholder relation outside of its conventional frames, outside of habits, and of course, how to increase cognition together and measure the value contribution. Right. So let's start with how we can survey the perceptions from our stakeholders, how they perceive us. So what I will present you is a number of questions which have actually been asked by big companies to their stakeholders. First of all, why? Why to survey stakeholders? We are involved, solicited, communicated by stakeholders only in function of how they see us. So it is the way that they see buyers which in reality decides about what they're going to invite us to. So in procurement, we frequently suffer from a lack of involvement, if sometimes we're even bypassed by certain stakeholders. We have to be aware that these bypasses, this lack of involvement, has to do with the fact that they have a bad perception or they have an operational perception. So they think of buyers as people who just push purchasing orders, just tender the market, and that's all. So we need to change this in order for them to involve us more quickly. And another thing is that we're involved and solicited by stakeholders who don't say how they see it. They sometimes censor their perception about us, because for interpersonal reasons, uh, or for organizational reasons. So we need to understand how they see us, and to make them say what they dare not to say necessarily. So, what to survey? What are the questions that have been asked by certain companies to their stakeholders, by certain buyers of certain companies to their stakeholders? Basically, there are four types of questions, which are four main axes for a survey to be formalized. First of all, compliance reactivity. Do will fulfill their expectations. Second, how is the relation with buyers? What are the good relations between buyers and stakeholders? How intimate are we? The question is the intimacy we have with their needs, with their practices, with their projects, with their initiatives, with their aspirations. Third main axis, it's how they perceive us as a way to make new contacts, notably with suppliers, with ecosystems, with innovators, with prescribers. So, do stakeholders see us as a kind of broker of relations? And last axis of survey is our ability to take them out of the conventional frames, to disrupt, to surprise, to bring innovation ideas or innovative ideas which bring some value. So these are the four main types of questions which have been asked by certain buyers to their stakeholders. Let's go into the details, right? First of all, compliance and reactivity. One of the first type of questions is how we fulfill the stakeholders' expectations. Do we bring a solution corresponding to what you've specified? How reactive have we been? That is, I would say, the basis. The second type of question, still about compliance and reactivity, is about the value we bring. What is the value that at the end buyers bring? So, if I put myself in the shoes of a stakeholder involving procurement, what value will it bring to me? Will it bring an assurance of cost reduction? Will it bring a hope for more innovative solutions? Will it bring a contribution to the sustainable improvement and the sustainable transformation? How do they see us? And you understand that when the answer to these questions is excellent for cost reduction and not so good or bad for innovative solutions and sustainability, then first of all, we understand why they don't involve us. And second, we know how we can be more involved, right? By bringing things on which they've been disappointed. That is for compliance and reactivity. Now, we also spoke about intimacy with stakeholders, good relations between buyers and stakeholders. And we could ask the questions to the stakeholders. How collaborative are our relations? Do we try to help? Be frank and open relation? Or is it just from time to time? Or is it just more competitive and conflicting than cooperative? How do we promote one another, right? Are we a real asset to one another? Do they see us? Do stakeholders see us as a way to increase their influence, to know more about the markets, to know more about technologies or solutions on the market? Uh, are we an asset to them? As well, so that's more functional, that's more about collaboration. There's also something more personal. Uh, do we have enough business professional intimacy so that at the end we have very strong relations, interpersonal relation? So the first question is about knowledge. Do we really know one another? Or do we just know what they require from us and they know from us what we can do for them? If we know more, if we know their aspirations, their ways of thinking, their intentions, of course, we can anticipate more and probably help more. How much trust is there between buyers and stakeholders? an absolute trust, or we don't trust at all, or something in between. How personal are buyer-stakeholder relations? You understand that if we think to have a good relation, but at the moment that we change jobs or we change attributions in the same jobs, the relation goes from open to closed, from existing to dead. It means that the relation was not so strong. So, do we have developed enough relation so that this relation will last independently from jobs and professional tensions? Right. We also mentioned the fact that they may expect from us to be a kind of entrance door. We should be the entrance door to information, innovation, suppliers, so that they, through us, get in contact with a number of opportunities on the market. So, how much do we facilitate the relation? Do they see us as brokers who expose them to the novelties of the market and the suppliers, and who expose the suppliers within the company? Are we connecting dots, or are we not helping? Are we connecting dots with people? And how much procurement introduces new contacts? So, do they get to know people through us? People at the suppliers, people in labs, people in universities, people in ecosystems, all kinds of people who can be valuable for our stakeholders. And how do we involve them outside? Do they get a chance working with buyers, working with us, working with procurement? Do they get a chance of being participating to a convention, to a lab, to an ecosystem, to a think tank, to a conference? If they get that chance, of course, we are the connecting dot, and they expect a lot from us. If we are more perceived as just reactive, just doing the minimum, or even sometimes hiding outer opportunities, then of course they will not expect a lot from us. Last but not least, disrupting activities. So first of all, how much does procurement introduce new suppliers and suppliers innovation? If we have shown to introduce novelty, new suppliers, new products, new technology, new solutions, of course, they will expect more from us, and they will probably involve us more. If we haven't shown to do that, of course, they will expect us to be the procurement buying machine on which they push a button for us to send POs and launch tenders. Um, we also need to see how disruptive we are perceived to be. So we can ask the question, how disruptive are we, right? Are we perceived as being in a constant brainstorming, or are we never proposing something disruptive, or only from time to time? Uh, we also can question how much of leaders we are perceived to be. Do they see us more as leaders or as followers? In our relation, buyer stakeholder, but also generically speaking, in the market, on the market, with suppliers, and with all kinds of people internally and externally. Uh, to which extent is procurement showing the way? Are we informing about the future? Are we a prospective function, or are we more a reactive function? Right, so you can see here a number of questions to understand how we are perceived. These questions are a collection of the most frequent and the best questions having been asked by certain buyers to their stakeholders, to get a picture, to get a rating, and to see where we're good and where we're less good, in order to work on that with them, hand in hand with them, to improve it and to better and improve the lowest scores. Right. Let's move to another topic, which is how they involve us, how to be involved by stakeholders, how to do that. First of all, there are stages of involvement. First thing, the first level of involvement is that we have data, transparency, and fluency, so that they know all what we know, and we get to know all what they know. Sharing data, sharing aims, data on the market, data on suppliers, on the business models of the suppliers, data uh, on the technologies, on the products, uh, all kind of data, so that we have a common vision about the market. What frequently blocks our perception from stakeholders is that they know more than we do, we know more than they do, we don't know the same thing. All this data is not shared. Once we have gone through this first stage, we can start to share knowledge and trends. What's the difference? This is more about the future. Where are we heading to? What should we develop? What kind of suppliers and markets are we interested in? Uh, and this must happen at least quarterly. If we do this only once a year, it remains occasional, and stakeholders do not rely too much on it. If this happens every 2 or 3 months, there's a frequency which develops the buyer-stakeholder relation. Once we've gone through this stage, we can start to explore together, and notably 1 or 2 times a year, explore with potential partners, frequently in ecosystems, inviting suppliers, inviting several suppliers, inviting a supplier and their second, third tier suppliers, inviting uh, a supplier and another client of the same supplier. So exploring together in in an open structure to understand the futures, understand the opportunities, to brainstorm about potential strategies. The last stage, of course, is to get full transparency and involvement on all kind of projects and market intelligence. So one of the key messages here is, of course, to take it in the right order. If we want to explore together, but we still do not have transparency on data, it will not work. If we want to explore together, but um, we haven't discussed the trends in the future, we haven't entered into a prospective way of working, stage two, it will not work. So let's take it in the right order and develop the buyer stakeholder relation with the due process. Needless to say, we must be involved at the right levels of work. And this is something frequently happening in the buyer stakeholder relations. What is it about? You can see here levels of involvement. I'm not entering into the details, but you can see that at the bottom you have more operational involvement. In the middle, strategic definition of a category strategy, for instance, and at the top, a kind of corporate involvement. These are level of work which frequently have to do with a hierarchy. You understand that there's something that must not happen, which is that between buyers and stakeholders, we're not involved at the right level. So a high corporate stakeholder is involved with an operational buyer, or the country. Procurement VP is involved with an operational stakeholder. So we need to have a kind of correspondence between the levels of involvement on the buying side and on the stakeholder side. And we need also these people to be involved at their right level, because if you involve a corporate level on the buying side and the stakeholder side, but you make them work at the operational level, then of course it does not work. So what can happen then? Well, this has been formalized in types of syndromes, right? We call it the level of work corruption, which means that we are not working at the right level of work. One typical syndrome is what we call compression. We are both working at a lower level of work. So we ask VPs, we ask important people to work on operational deliveries, right? And then, of course, guess what? We spend our time managing crisis, micromanaging things, and things are slow. The symptoms are clear, and they detect a compression syndrome. Another very frequent syndrome is that you have a pull down. So higher level of works have to perform lower level of works. They're involved at a lower level of work. Another frequent syndrome is showmanship. That is exact contrary. Somebody is involved at a higher level of work because he or she wants to be perceived differently. So there's an overemphasis on of one's work at one's level of work, over visibility, and it's frequently very egocentric, and it destroys how we are perceived by stakeholders. There might be a missing input at the right level of work. So we have operational people working together, corporate people working together, but our category managers do not work with the key people specifying the needs. So basically, we have the top level, we have the bottom level, and we miss the middle level. That's what we call the vacuum syndrome. So you understand, working with stakeholders, being perceived by stakeholder, uh, demands that we plug the right people on our side with the right people on their side, and that these people work at the right level, which is the level of their responsibilities. So, what are the hints to be involved then? A few hints. First of all, have we created what we call a we-ness? Uh, do we belong, we meaning we buyers plus the stakeholders, do all of us feel to belong to the same community? We have an identity. We identify ourselves to our projects, to our beliefs, to the initiatives we have detected together. Is there a formal organization or at least an informal network so that we constantly are exposed to one another, formally and or informally? Is there a we-ness between buyers and stakeholders? If there's no we-ness, of course, it's going to be difficult to be involved at the right level, and we will be perceived as non-credible partners that will probably try to either to bypass procurement or to ask them to perform the most valueless tasks. Another hint is about the context. Are we relating to a context? And I think you can understand that, particularly in 2022, we are living within a context of inflation, context of scarcity of raw materials, context of geopolitical tensions, context of bigger pressure for sustainability and for sustainable transformation. If everything that we do together has nothing to do with that context, well, it's not really credibilizing procurement, is it? If all what we do, on the contrary, relates to sustainable transformation, to risk of non-supply of raw materials, to scarcity of human labor, to inflation, to potential risks linked to a geopolitical tension, you understand that it will create meaning. So try to relate what you do to the outer context to show that procurement is contributing to the adaptation to the outer context. Uh, Another hint is to show, demonstrate that we are learning from them and that they are learning from us. So that it's a loop, right? We both learn from one another. And that creates a type of leadership based on agility, on which we lead them, we develop a certain leadership towards stakeholders because we both learn from one another. This is what we will call a little later, within 20 minutes, mutual cognition, learning from one another and learning together. And the fact of being two types of people, buyers and non buyers, buyers and stakeholders, increases, multiplies this learning capability. We should show this and we should demonstrate that because they work close to us, because we work together, they will learn more. A last thing is about followership. So what is followership? Well, the country of leadership the theory of, of followership says that a good leader is able to elicit followership at followers. A good leader is able to make people willing to follow him or her. And that's something that we can apply to buyer stakeholder relations. Do we make our stakeholders willing to follow us, to understand what we do, to understand our opportunities? Uh, do we make people, are we increasing people's desire to work with procurement? And how much are we creating this desire? So you understand that has to do with a certain leadership that we want to develop. Leadership made of relational influence and emotional appeal, but relying below on a good balance, a good relation, on a certain awareness of who we are, and of course, an ethics and behaviors. Right. So let's work on that desire and people's satisfaction. How do we can we improve stakeholder satisfaction? And I'd like to discuss a little bit the satisfaction loop, right? By taking an example, everybody knows gastronomy, and everybody knows that in learning processes, appetence is appetite. So the secret of gastronomy is to stimulate the appetite, not to fulfill the appetite, to stimulate it, to create the appetite of the customer, but never to exhaust it completely, because once it's exhausted, well, people are satisfied and go away. No, all the art of gastronomy is to stimulate the appetite, and once people are starting to be satisfied, to create another appetite. So it's a constant loop. We surprise people. From the surprise, we start to satisfy them. And once they are satisfied and they want to get some more, they express their desire, we surprise them again and we take them somewhere else. And you understand it's a never ending loop, because at every time that they express their desires, we take them somewhere else. Uh, and we make them experience, experiment something that they have not tasted before. Well, that's probably what the satisfaction of stakeholders can be about. How can we surprise our stakeholders? How do we make them satisfied? How do we check their satisfactions? How do they express their desires? How do we hear their desires? How do we partially answer their desires, but creating a surprise which takes them somewhere else? How are we constantly feeding that loop, knowing that if you just satisfy what they want, they'll be happy without you. They will probably compliment you, but then they will not necessarily see us as providing new value. So be careful. There are blockers of these loops: routines, organization, lack of recognition, frustrated initiatives, no right to fail. All this can, of course, block the satisfaction loop. So, what are the key skills to surprise? Because all the art, if we come back to from this analogy with gastronomy, we understand that all the keystone of this loop is the ability to constantly surprise them with new features, new innovation, new suppliers, new business models that they hadn't tasted before, that they did not imagine before. So how should we how can we become able to surprise them constantly? Well, a few skills may help. First of all, an understanding, our understanding of stakeholders, understanding of the other party. It's close to empathy, but it's probably a little less emotional than empathy. It can be very rational. It's the ability to put oneself in the shoes of the stakeholders, to anticipate their needs, because we know them. We know their pressures. We know their professional aspirations. And you may remember that we have spoken about knowing them personally in terms of people. What are the people in front of me? What do they expect? What do they desire? To accelerate the understanding of and the anticipation of their needs and the actions to be taken. Another key skill in the ability to take initiatives to put people in contact with one another. We call it social entrepreneurship, being the connecting dot, making people connect among one another, create relationships with others, and notably between stakeholders and suppliers, between stakeholders and all kind of people helping the knowledge, like labs, universities, conferences, specialists of a technology, specialists of a market, to create also a sense of belonging together. Another key skill is charisma. Uh, Charisma is distal. Charisma is how do people like the image of myself? So what we should reflect on this. What kind of image do we have? Do we have the image of being a kind of procurement robot, just answering to what they have requested? Or do we have the image of somebody having the knowledge, a specific knowledge of something? We need to put emphasis on what we know, what we're good at, to create spontaneous fellowship. Another key skill, of course, is the ability to perceive small signals, weak signals, all kinds of information coming from private discussions, coming from weak signals we detect here and there, to understand their desire, their rejections, their feelings, the trends. Another key skill, of course, is the ability to think long term, to project the evolution of a situation, a deal, a relation in the long run, and to consider all potential options and scenarios, and to envisage the reaction to have to all of them. Uh, Another skill needed is the cognitive appetite. Be willing to taste, to know more, and to foster common learning between buyers and stakeholders. Another skill is plasticity, the ability just to change, to adapt. Because when a new information came in and completely changes the game, we are able to flip ideas, flip positions, transform operating modes, reformat the thinking. This plasticity of working. And the last one is creativity. We need to be perceived as creative, able to invent, able to adopt the new cues, new models, new ideas, and not only following the routines. Because unfortunately, procurement is known for its process and the ability that we have had in the past decades to make people respect the steps of the procurement process. So this everybody knows, but that does not create a lot of appeal toward procurement, right? So we need to surprise them by showing that we've been that, but we're not only that, we're also very creative people, able to elaborate new ideas. Be careful also that there's a satisfaction loop, but there's also a dissatisfaction loop. Dissatisfaction when we fail, right? So basically, we've taken action, but the results are not okay. So what happens if it doesn't work? If our actions were the wrong one, we can change assumptions. And notably, how we measure satisfaction, how we make specs. If it's still not working, then we have to change how we specify context, the specifying network, the organization, and the people involved in buying centers, involving external influencers, right? So changing assumptions has to do with how we measure their satisfaction. It's not only about price reduction, it's not only about lead time, changing the specs and analyzing functionally their needs. Changing context has to do with involving different people in the buying centers, and we will give more details in a few minutes about the specifying network, who's specifying, about the organization, the interactions among stakeholders, and the involvement of external influencers such as labs, NGOs, societal activists, etc., so that we show to relate to the context. Again, the meaning that we bring, we procurement, has also to do with how we respond to an outer context. Again, inflation, shortage of resources, sustainable transformation, etc. Right. So, how to foster relations which are more focused on value creation? How do they perceive our role? What's a role first? The role that we have, the role of buyers. Well, the role always relies on a number of pillars, notably on the organization, what is our job description, the immediate context, the micro setting, how do they speak to us, how frequently do we meet, etc., etc. The relations, we've spoken about that, the quality and the good knowledge of a mutual relation, and the person who we are, right? So, how do they see us as a person? So, these are the dimensions of a role. A role emerges from these dimensions and stand on these pillars. So, when we want to change roles, going from an old role to a new role, we can change everything. We're not changing roles by not changing the context, not changing the person, not changing the organization. We have to change everything. So it means that we should bring something new in the relation that we have with them. Bring new types of interactions, new types of meetings. We spoke about meeting twice a year or every quarter on innovation, etc., etc. Introduce new 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 meetings, new structures to change the relationship. We should show that personally, we have changed too, that we've been trained on a matter, that we changed the way that we're conceiving procurement, etc. We should show that we respond more to the context. And in 2022, we have loads of reasons to do so, saying, hey, because of what happened in the market in 2022, post pandemic, inflation, geopolitical tension, scarcity, sustainable transformation becoming urgent. Um, the nature of what I'm proposing myself, buyer, will change, dear stakeholder. Show that you're changing something toward the context, and you can also create an organizational change. Change your job description, change your title, so to materialize the change of role. Right. Needless to say, all this needs to be cooperative with them. But I'd like to say a little bit about that. What does it mean to be cooperative? It's the contrary of being competitive. And you can see here two groups of children. They're competing among groups, but they're cooperating within the groups. Right. So, what is this? Uh, competition or cooperation is in reality social interdependence, but it's not the same type. Cooperation is a positive social interdependence. So cooperation is when my success relies on your success. Then we are naturally cooperating. We help one another. Competition is the contrary, is when my success relies or is helped to your failure, right? So competition occurs when individuals perceive that their goals can be achieved if the others fail to achieve their own goals. You understand that we must anchor the buyer stakeholder relation on cooperation and not on competition. But be careful, because the reality is a mix. And You can see here a number of things which convey cooperation, cooperative relations, brainstorming, groups about the prospection on technologies, on markets, on suppliers, study groups about total cost, about risks, about innovation, triangle projects in which we, buyers and stakeholders, are united toward a supplier. But we also have opportunities, opportunities, I wouldn't say, moments of negative social interdependence and competition when we challenge their needs and when we are supposed to say, sorry, maybe you don't need it, maybe you need less, when we negotiate internally among stakeholders, when we are analyzing functionally what is it that they really want to, so that they de-specify their ask. So you understand, in real life, uh, we have a mix of competitive relations and cooperative relation with the same people. So all the art of becoming more cooperative with one another is to increase that green and reduce that red. And you've understood from what we've said before that when we're speaking about the future, when we're speaking about brainstorming, about study groups, etc., it's also a way to anchor the relationship on something positive. Needless to say, these positive cooperation endeavors are frequently more proactive. You need to organize them and you need to take the initiative. Whereas the competitive relations are frequently more reactive, based on their ask and our answer, our reaction to their ask. Needless to say, uh, the context help or don't help. If we're, you may recognize the Kraljic matrix here. If we are in a situation towards suppliers of strategic cooperation, everybody will be more naturally cooperating, and even the buyers and the stakeholders. If we are in situations of leverage or bottleneck, we will have competitive relations with suppliers, but also competitive tensions between buyers and stakeholders. Right. Um, Worldviews underpinning our relations. Uh, we must, the fact how we see the world has a lot of impact on the relation we have with stakeholders. You can see here a list of potential worldviews. We can see the world as mechanistic, ever the reality works like a machine, more chaotic, interacting variables. Constructivist, we make the reality, we create the reality together. The reality is co-created. Relativistic, in reality, it's all a matter of opinions, etc., etc. According to the worldview, uh, we will have different vantage points. We will see the relation between buyers and stakeholder more anchored on processes or on ecosystems or on influence and power, etc., etc. What we have to do here is probably to adopt their worldview, to adapt to how they see the world. So if they see procurement as part of a process, yeah, well, then we need to involve people in the process. If they see procurement in a constructivist way, then we need to win our seat at the right decision making tables. So adapt to the stakeholders adopting their worldview. How can we be disruptive then? Uh, we can be disruptive by, first of all, complexifying the stakeholders network. And I've mentioned that a little earlier about when we spoke about buying centers. What is a buying center? A buying center is all people who converge into defining a need, putting constraints, giving their constraints and their hopes and expectations and needs to us. That is a buying center. An old buying center is mostly made of procurement, finance, marketing, and of course, users. Uh, Today, we have more advanced buying centers, which involve, of course, users and requesters, to which we should bring satisfaction, but which also involve people who have kind of institutional constraints, customers, regulators, share owners, with which we should comply. We can also involve certain suppliers because they show the yield, the trend, notably when the suppliers bring new technology. Think about buying centers' needs on new types of energies, right? Well, actually, stakeholders have to be aware of what the suppliers are able to provide, so because it will influence what they will specify. So we need to involve the suppliers so that we update ourselves on their capacities and capabilities. And we also have to enlarge the stakeholders' scope in terms of of community. We can involve people from the society, notably societal activists, right? You may have heard of a number of NGOs and societal activists who have been involved by big banks and big insurance companies. So that they help to anticipate the need and they help the transformation of what we buy. That we involve the worldwide procurement community, other buyers, that we involve people from our corporate alliances and partners. So we can disrupt by creating that new types of buying centers involving outer people, which today we are not accustomed to involve in the definition of needs. Customers, with which we co-develop revenue, risk share, suppliers, with which we will speak about risk sharing again, co-developments, regulators, share owners, corporate alliances and partners, worldwide procurement community to benchmark against other buyers, and societal players who can bring a vision and prescribe what will be needed in the future. You understand that if we want to be seen as credible speakers and leaders, we should probably help stakeholders to span boundaries, to trespass the limits of the conventional frames. So we need probably to turn and to integrate people who will help to span these boundaries, like heretics, heroes, outlaws, visionaries. Who are these people? Heretics are people who advocate an opinion which is rejected today, but in which there is a truth for tomorrow. So the heretics, in reality, says tomorrow's truth, even if it's contradicting today's truth. A hero is somebody who is an example to follow. So something that we can replicate uh, uh, and personified by that person. An outlaw is somebody who breaks the rule. I give an example: the very first buyers who said, "Yes, I will increase the price. I will increase the price, but this is for the sake of total cost." It's an increase of price, but it's a decrease of the total cost. It's also a decrease of risks, and it's also the right technology to believe. So yes, I as a buyer choose to buy the most from the most expensive supplier. You understand that the first time that a buyer has done that, he's been perceived as going out of the rules of procurement. This is not the rules of the that the buyers must abide by. And visionaries who tell something about the future. They have an intuition about the future. Uh, Usually, these four types of people are rejected. Heretics get burnt, heroes are eliminated, outlaws are sanctioned, and visionaries are ignored because they disrupt our routines and they are painful. So we need to detect these people in the mistakes that people make, in the innovative methods, in the mistakes that in which there is a value, there is a learning, people who have proved to be unrecognizably right. We should recruit these people within procurement. So when we recruit in procurement, we should pay attention of not recruiting always the same profile of buyers, diversifying the profile that we're recruiting and recruiting a bit of these heretics, heroes, outlaws, and visionaries. We should manage them also in the right way. It's senseless to recruit a heretic, a hero, an outlaw, a visionary, and then to ask them to abide by the law and not to disrupt. We are recruiting them so that they disrupt stakeholders. They bring that surprise, which we spoke about. So we need to leave space for trial runs and have them inspire the teams. They need to be managed apart. So we need to create an HR plan within procurement to find, attract, onboard, and manage these people, because they may be key to the renovation of the buyer stakeholder relations. Last point, this is about learning from one another, right? Again, buyer stakeholder relations are completely changed by the fact that they recognize that they can learn from us, they can learn something new, develop cognition together. So we basically want to change their cognitives, learning together, so that they understand that there is value added in procurement, and surprising value added, that we change them rationally, so that they internalize this, they recognize this, and spontaneously involve you, and then educate them more emotionally, so that they start to advocate our role toward their people. We need stories, business cases, education, workshops, involvement. Let's go into the details of that. Can we? What are the stories we tell? Problem solving stories, good examples of what we've done, SRM stories. Uh, what are the business cases that we can show to stakeholders, like a TCO analysis, an innovation story? How are we involved in common education? So, it can be that we invite stakeholders to procurement trainings or procurement workshops, or that we are invited in their workshops. Uh, are there some workshops together, right? Notably, when we define a category strategy, at the moment of the definition and the formulation of a category, we are used in procurement to do this alone. Why would we do this in a collaborative way with stakeholders? Pilot projects, common initiatives, and also communication. Are we saying all what we're doing, repeating it, showing it in conventions, presenting it in team meetings? What are we saying about all the successful initiatives that we have taken? How can we increase our visibility by marketing ourselves internally and being involved at a higher level? In conclusion, uh, we need, of course, to do all this, to develop indicators, maybe kind of KPIs, to measure our contribution and to show not only that we are satisfying stakeholders, but we are taking them somewhere else, that we are giving them ideas, that we are inspiring them, that we are prospecting things together, that we are putting them in contact with people who are useful to them. We need to measure all this, and to show something tangible about that. So, coming back to the four ACEs, which we discussed at the very beginning, we need first to measure their satisfaction. Uh, and that should be value based, their satisfaction on cost, on innovation, on risk, etc., etc. Um, but we also need to develop relations between stakeholders and buyers. So we need to understand how they rate us, how they perceive us. And you can make a survey with a 360-degree rating, but you can also work more operationally in workshops every year, trying to make them formulate what they think about us, and working on how to respond to it. We must measure how much we are brokering contacts, and this can be very tangible. How many people have we have we introduced to stakeholders? How many people? How many names? And this can be measured and monitored every year. We can also measure how disruptive our initiatives are. We can ask uh, questions to understand how they rate our leadership and how they describe our leadership, and then work on it, maybe on workshops, so that we develop this together. This is the end of this conference. Thank you very much. I do hope you got some hints a few ideas maybe to develop the relations between buyers and stakeholders. I see some questions, a lot of questions, so I may not be able to answer to all, but maybe to answer or comment a few of them. Uh, how there's a question from João. How do you see the role of a procurement business partner in all this subject? Well, a procurement business partner is probably the keystone for doing all this. A procurement business partner is not a procurement operational person. If we come back to one of the slides we've gone through, the levels of work, you understand that a procurement business partner, by definition, is at the top of a scale of responsibilities. You may remember this slide, João. Uh, the procurement business partner is probably at the corporate level. So we need a procurement business partner to create the architecture of the relation between procurement and users. So organizing the meetings, the measurement of their satisfaction, etc., etc. So I would say that a procurement business partner, by definition, is a kind of architect of all what we are saying. Another comment is I like that one. The need for may vary with the company's maturity and overall situation. Of course, if you're buying pure commodities, you're happy staying in a very reactive mode. We're not saying that this should concern everything that we buy, fortunately, because we would need to recruit loads of people. And that is, the base of category management. Each category deserves a different treatment. Some category deserves a commodity treatment. We just need to supply at the due cost, and that's all. But some categories are key not only to what we buy, but key to our productions, key to our brand, key to our positioning, key to our sales, key to the meaning of our company. And there, of course, there's a strong need for the development of a common and mutual intelligence between buyers and stakeholders. Right. I see a question about it's not a question, it's a comment from Andrew saying this is about procurement leadership. And I'd like to conclude on that. It is about procurement leadership. Um, Procurement was born 60, 70 years ago. So this is very recent. If you compare to sales, the first sales departments were in the 18th century. The first marketing departments, they were called propaganda at that time, 19th century. Procurement was born in the second half of the 20th century. So we're the newborn of company functions. And indeed, we were born as executioners, uh, just pushing POs and tendering markets, and that's all. But now that the world is in front of challenges, the challenges of resources, of materials, of human resources, but even more than that, the world is in front of a sustainable transformation, and it has become urgent. And all of this will happen through suppliers, while procurement has a role. And we cannot be executioners anymore. And this is the reason for which we need to transform buyer stakeholder relations. Thank you very much for your attention. And we do hope at the EIPM to see you again at one of our future webinars in 2023. Thank you again.